Hello, this is a short message for my students from Looking Ahead, just before we start painting. Guys, unfortunately we are unable to come into work due to this virus, so we all have to stay at home. As you can see, I'm working from home, along with all the other staff and Linda. They're all working very busily at home, working on the project. And what we're going to be doing is getting a pack together, an activity pack for you to have sent to your home, and it's going to be about 2 or 3 weeks before we get it together, and you should get this lovely pack, and inside this pack are going to be activities that you're going to take part in and do. So there's going to be all sorts of things to do with woodwork, arts, crafts. There's going to be cooking. There's going to be things to do with the wildlife and the gardening and horticulture. So in these packs are going to be these things that you can have some fun doing, filling in. But anything you do, keep it, because what we're going to plan at the end, when we all come back to work, is have a big exhibition, and we're going to invite lots of friends and family and the mayor and people like that's going to come along. Maybe social services maybe can come, and maybe some other important people that we can get together to come along to see your exhibition and what you did. Also, what I'm going to be doing is on my YouTube channel, I'm going to do a piece of art that you can follow me. So my guys that I do art with, and we're doing a project on endangered animals. So I'm going to show you how to draw a hedgehog. And if you're not in my art group, you can still join in and have some fun drawing a hedgehog. And I'll show you a very easy way of doing that. So if you want to tap on in a couple of days' time, and you'll see me, and you can join along with me and draw the hedgehog. My YouTube channel is called Brian Davenport Artist, and I put that just underneath me so that you can see. You don't have to wait for these packs to come. You can just start it now if you want to. So the people that are in the wildlife group, you could be doing some bird watching outside through your windows. You could be doing bird counts like we do at work, and also you could be writing them down or even taking photographs of the birds. And as I said, keep everything that you do so we can put it into our exhibition. But what I'd like to say now is goodbye. Look after yourselves. Drink water, wash your hands, keep safe. And we really miss you a lot. You take care, and you'll be hearing from the staff. They're going to be ringing you and talking to you. And I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.
Welcome to my studio in Margate in Kent. My name's Brian. I've been painting for many years, and I've been running art classes for about 13, 14 years now. So I'd like to take this opportunity and filming my classes, putting them together so that you can watch and follow along with us, and hopefully learn new things and maybe revisit some old things. Classes and courses that I run here in my studio help to support a project that I set up about 16 years ago with a friend of mine. We're called Looking Ahead, and we work with young adults with learning needs, where we support them towards realistic work and independent living. So if you'd like to find out more, please visit my website www.briandavenportartist.com, and don't forget to like or subscribe if you like the channel. So let's get started.
Hello, welcome back to my studio in Margate in Kent. This is a photograph of my studio. What we was going to do was stand outside, draw it, sketch it, bring it back in and turn it into watercolour. But unfortunately, due to this virus, I cannot be standing outside too long to paint this picture. It would have taken me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to do this sketch. So what you see is a finished sketch in my studio, masked out and ready to paint. As you can see, the streets are very empty and bare where everyone is in lockdown in this country. There's a finished drawing. It's upside down. I've masked out all the windows and some of the other little detail pieces I want to save as white paper. I'm going to use 4 colours to paint this picture, and I'm starting with the sky as usual, wet into wet, and that's just going to be an ultramarine blue. As I said earlier, I would like to have done the drawing outside, but due to this awful virus that's going around, unfortunately we can't be out. We've had to shut down the project where we work with young adults with learning needs and working from home. And as you heard earlier, we've set up these little packs for them that we're going to be sending home that they can all enjoy and work on. And at the end of it, as you heard, there's going to be a great exhibition and that we all can come back safe and well. Just getting back to the picture here, what I'm putting on now is a raw sienna, and I'm bringing it from the horizon line about a third of the way up into the sky, and just using some clean water, just washing that in so it all fades away to nowhere. As you can see, I'm just adding a little bit more of the ultramarine blue now, and I'm just bringing that in over the top of the raw sienna, and we're going to fill in the whole of the sky with the ultramarine blue. Just got a little hair there. I'm just brushing it off with my brush. If it happens to you, just use your brush. Try not to use your finger and scratch at the hair. You can damage the surface of the paper if you're not careful by doing that. So just use your brush and just gently work it to the side, and then go over it with just clean water or a little bit of paint, and those marks will go. I'm now just finishing off the top here, just going over the edge where the mount will be. I'm not worried about that because it's going to cover it. I'm just making sure it's a nice smooth finish before I turn it round and turn it up on the right side up. Just finishing off here, smoothing them down. Let's step back. I've turned it up the right way now, as you can see, and it's still wet, and I'm coming with a piece of kitchen roll, paper towel, and just lifting off some of the clouds. Trying to replicate the photograph of when I took this picture. It was such a beautiful day and it's a nice clear sky, so I'm just adding a little bit of cloud as we go. I've left it to dry now. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing, and here is a raw sienna and ultramarine blues just mixed together, more raw sienna than blue, and I'm just blocking in some of these little tiny buildings and houses along the edge of my road that the gallery's in. Just little squares, little blocks, that's all they are, using a small detail brush. Just going to carry on finishing off these buildings on this side, leaving out little windows, little doors and shapes like that. In this road, the next house that I paint on this side is where a gentleman called Mr. Cobb lived, and he built a brewery just behind where my building is, and then he built my building, and he built it as the bank. It's always been a bank, and it's where his employees would come and open up bank accounts, and the brewery is no longer there, but the bank stayed. And as I say, it's always been a bank until recently, and now my gallery is in there, and so is my studio. The little round window you see in the building is my studio, and the 3 windows down on the left hand side is the studio, and there's 2 windows on the right hand side, and then the doors that are open, that opens up into my gallery downstairs. And then the room's directly above my studio with a little balcony. That is where the Lord Mayor's office is, and he works from there. And then a couple of rooms along is other organisations that run from in my building. There's a little bit of history there, and maybe one day we'll go in and have a little tour of the studio and the gallery and where I work and where the students work from looking ahead. In this gallery here for the project, we do life skills and we do cooking and we do arts and crafts with them in there. And they serve the customers, do the cooking, bake the cakes. We have a little tea room inside. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, that's all been closed down due to this virus. So all those activities will be sent home for the students to work on while this virus and this lockdown is on. The colours I'm using now is the Raw Sienna Ultramarine Blue, but I've put a little bit more blue into it and taken out some of the sienna. I'm now adding in a little shadow around the base of the building. And again, you leave it to dry each time, because I don't want to put wet paint near damp paint, or it'll just bleed into each other. And I just want a nice hard edge here, as it being a building. In a moment, I'm just going to start on the building, on my studio. This building I'm doing now is where Mr. Cobb lived, as I said earlier. The one that I'm doing now is the building. It's quite a big building. I'm now doing the lamppost, and that colour is ultramarine blue and burnt umber to give me a very dark colour. I very rarely use black, it's always mix up my own. It's just a typical Victorian lamppost that we have over here in the old town of Margate. When painting glass like this, it's not the colours you paint the glass, it's the colours you leave out. So by painting the buildings through the glass, that's all you need to do. You don't need to paint a colour of glass in this case. When I come to the windows, there's a different thing. You'll be painting the reflection in those as we get to later on. What I'm doing here is I'm just painting down one side of the lamppost in the dark. I use an ultramarine blue and burnt umber to make that dark, and I'm coming down to the lamppost. As you see, I'm only doing the half of it at the moment. And when I fill half of it in, then I pick up a little bit of water, clean water, and do the other half while it's still wet. So this half is still wet that I'm doing now on the left hand side of the lamppost, as you see in a moment. Picking up some clean water, and I'm coming down the side with the clean water, and it touches the damp paint that's on there, and it runs together and it creates a cylinder shape. There's the water just going on, and that makes the lamppost look round and cylinder. Just making sure it's nice and straight. And in a moment I'm going to wash my brush off, leave that to dry. I'm going to zoom in, and then we're going to look at the buildings on the right hand side. So just make sure it's all finished, nice and straight. Zoom in here, and now we're going to start with an ultramarine blue and just put in this side of the building. I'm looking at my photograph on my camera every now and then. If you see, I'm looking to the right. I've got the camera set up so I can see the picture, and I'm just working from the colours that's there.
So ultramarine blue on first, a little bit of water, and soften that colour. And then come down again for the next piece. This had a little bit of burnt umber to it. Just get that edge in, there's a little side of the building there. When I'm painting something like this, I like to do each building individually and changing the colours slightly. As I get closer, they get slightly darker, and the weaker the colours are, the further back they go. I'm going to add in some new colours soon. The colours I'm using in this picture is ultramarine blue, burnt umber, raw sienna and light red. They're the 4 colours that we're going to be using whilst we're painting this picture. The colour I'm using at the moment is ultramarine blue and burnt umber to give me that grey, and this is representing the roofs on all these buildings as we go along. Let's make one at a time instead of painting as a whole block. Bringing in some windows and some doors. This colour here is light red and raw sienna. Just blocking in this side of the wall. Going up the top here, doing a similar thing. And also leaving out shapes of windows and doors, which I'll come along in a little while and put them in. If there's any questions you want, just email the questions and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. My email address is on my website. But do leave comments below and I'll try to answer any questions and get back to you, as I said, as soon as I possibly can. Just finishing off this side of the building here and just adding a little bit of light red, a little bit more raw sienna, just to darken it slightly as it's coming closer. Then in a moment I'm going to pick up some colours, darker ones, and start adding in doors and windows and things like that. And just picking out some of the detail. Not too much detail as it's way away in the distance, and I want to focus more on my building than on the little buildings down the road. Just putting in some windows here, so I'm using a darker colour of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. I'm just putting in the roof here of this bay window. Just finishing off the roof here on this bay window here. I'm going to put in some little reflections in the glass as we go. And just putting in those suggestions of windows and reflection. The top window's open, so I've left that as a bigger gap. Putting in some windows down here, suggestions of windows. A couple of doors, and again there's posts here that hold up this part of the building. Door frames, things like that. Just suggestions of little shop sign here I'm putting in. Nothing too detailed, just the shape, give the suggestion. Windows up here. Again, this colour here is more blue than brown, so it's a weaker colour to give it that distance within the street.
Just adding a little bit more detail in the back here. Little chimneys just dropping in. Now pull back a little bit here, using just clean water and just wetting the road. Goes up to here. There's a shadow of the lamp and of the buildings on the pathway, so I'm just wetting these at the moment. Looking at the picture, knowing there's a shadow just down here. I'll put a suggestion of it with pencil, as you can see. And now I'm coming around just clean water and just randomly just painting that in. Following the edge of the building here. Just working that water into the paper. I'm going to pick up a colour here of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. More blue than the umber, so quite a weak grey colour, and just gently follow that path. And I want this quite a weak wash, because I want it as if there's light shining on this path, as there was as the day I took the photograph. This is very bright, very light path here. And then I'm going to bring the same colour around here on the side of the road as I'm going up to the edge of my building. And I'm going to go light to dark first. So on goes my light colours of the road. And that's all wet into wet. Very careful not to hit that lamppost. And then I'm going to put in a little bit of a lighter colour here, still wet into wet. I just take some of those brush marks out. I'm picking up some more colour here, slightly darker, and then we're going to come in with a shadow of some of these buildings. Just putting in a couple of windows here that I've missed as I've got the shadow colour on. My brush. Adding them in. It's giving the chance for the lighter colour to dry on the road. I'm going to use the same colours I'm using for these windows as the shadow colour on the road. Just putting the last few in here. A couple of doors and windows that I've left out. Stepping back and having a look. And up here in the balcony, some beautiful stonework. And what I've done is I've masked it out with masking fluid, and I'm filling in with the shadow colour in between all those lovely carvings on that stone balcony. Step back, left it to dry. Coming in now, taking off the masking fluid at the top, very gently rubbing that off. Revealing some of those lovely stonework, very similar to the stonework on the balcony. Down around the whole edge of the building. Just down the side here. Having to leave this to dry for a little while. Make sure it's completely dry with taking off masking fluid, because if it's not, it can tear the paper. So I'm gently just rubbing off this balcony, revealing the white paper underneath it, where I'm going to paint the stonework in, and just gently taking that all away. And the other little pieces here, just leaving the windows. That's it, picking off any little loose pieces, I don't want to paint those. And stepping back, picking up the colour, and just filling in now all the parts of the building with just clean water. This is working wet into wet. So I'm wetting it first with a flat brush. Then I've got to mix up a colour of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And I'm going to put a very light grey on the building first. and doing it in sections, as you can see. Picking up the colour, using the corner edge of my brush and following my pencil lines, just drawing them in with that very light, weak colour. Doing the top of the building now, picking up the paint. Coming along the top, and then I'm going to put in the carvings of those lovely little stone pieces in between, leaving little gaps of sky. That's what I masked out. It takes a little while, this piece, as I'm going in with the corner of my brush, just painting in each of those little carvings, taking up the edge here. A couple more. Picking up some more paint here and just going across with a little bit of a darker side to these. Putting in the darker edge, or where that part of the building hangs over slightly. Now bringing in some more of the posts and the hangover of the building. Very fortunate to have a building like this to work in. It gets very busy in the summer. The gallery is used for local artists to show their work. We can take about 100 paintings in the gallery downstairs. It's a very big space. We can have them hanging on the walls or on the freestanding stands that we have there, maybe some on easels. We also have a small area where we provide teas and coffees, pieces of cake, sandwiches, things like that, which are all made by the students. And the students serve the customers, wait on the customers, and some even work with the artists and help in putting up the paintings. It's a great community project that we've got here, and it works really well. What I'm doing here now is using the same colour, that light grey, and just wetting it first, and then I'm going to be bringing in the colour. And as I said earlier, is just paint it by sections, and that way you've got a small area. If it dries and you run out of paint, you can remix that colour quite easily. Just putting on that grey colour here, and on the front of the building. Just following the pencil lines, just putting in a few little carvings, a little bit of the detail and the shadow colours under each of these with that grey. Now we're doing the side of the building here, just with some clean water. Picking up some of the colour, and now I'm just painting the roof in and the side of the building that you can just about see on the photograph. So again, I'm not worrying about too much of the detail on this. Just want to bring that line in here so it lines up with that building I've just put in. As it's dried a little bit, I can put that shadow colour on as the part of it leans over. that back and make sure it lines up. This one's just got to be slightly lower. A little bit of water on here. Checking the photograph. And again, this is all working wet into wet. Putting the grey on now. And then bringing that down. Again, just adding some clean water down this side of the building. I'm going over the windows because they're masked out still, so it doesn't matter if I go over the edge. And I'm just putting in all the stonework on all the buildings with this grey colour. Doing one piece at a time. So I'm going to do the top half first with the grey. Bringing in the colour now, as you can see. I just work along that building there. Leaving a little window out. And the buildings that I'm doing at the moment, where the windows are there, there's another project that's in that building. Another community project. That window that I'm doing, and the two next to it is where the Lord Mayor's office is, where they have meetings there regularly. The Lord Mayor's secretary is there every day, so I'm now just doing their offices now, and again just wetting it, cutting in around the edge of that window with clean water. Then picking up that grey toned colour. And then just putting that on there. Hope you're sticking with me. This picture did take a little while to do. I personally don't like speeding up footage, to be honest. I just like people to see the whole thing from beginning to end. So hopefully you're sticking with it. And again, if it's something you want, just leave a comment in the comments below, and I'll certainly try my best to sort anything out. So if you'd like me to speed these sort of things up, I can do. But me personally, I just like to leave it as whole so that you can see the whole process. Just cutting around the edge of the windows here. Again, I'm not overly worried because of the masking fluid that's on there. So I'm just darkening up this side here. Just a touch, staying in within the lines. As I say, this is going to be an underpaint, so on top of this I'm going to put another colour. So I want some of these colours of greys and shapes to come through over my next colour that I put on. Just finishing that off. Brilliant. Stopping, stepping back and having a look. If you do any painting or any drawing, do every now and then step away from your work, have a look. It looks much better when you stand away from something. When you work on something quite close all the time, you kind of miss out the mistakes and you don't see them until you look back. Then you do, and walk away sometimes, walk away from your work, give it 10 minutes or so and come back to it. Then you'll find any mistakes that's there that you can correct. That's certainly what I teach my students when I'm teaching them. I'll just wet that now with just clean water, and then I'm going over with that grey, keeping the brush strokes as straight and as regular as I can follow the buildings. If the building's going to the right, I'll paint it to the right, or to the left, up and down and horizontally. My brush strokes will follow the shape of the building. Going over this balcony here, it's a curved balcony, as you can see. I want some of those patches to come through when it's dry, through the actual layer over the top, what I'm going to put on, just to give it that feeling of wear and tear. Getting that curve in over the balcony. Just carrying on with that grey colour just over this side. Following the edge of the building down. Stepping back and looking. Finishing off this side here and here. Looking at the picture. I'm just going to darken this side just a little bit. Get those angles in right with the edge of the brush. Get that curve in by shaping my angles on that curve, keeping the brush strokes following the curve and the angles, using the corner of my brush and painting some of that lovely stonework just in between. Stepping back and looking. It's dried. Do you see it jump there? Just going to add in that darker side now. Making this edge, the right side of the building, slightly darker. The angles on this was quite tricky to draw. The vanishing point on this side was virtually right down into the corner of the page. It took a little while for me to get this drawing done. As I said, about an hour and a half, 2 hours it took. But what I do is I work on an A3 size piece of paper and I draw my picture out on that first. And on that surface is the one that I make all my mistakes. So getting that vanishing point, for instance, was quite tricky. So I did it on the A3 size piece of paper first. When I'm happy with my drawing and I've got everything the way that I want it to look, I will then transfer it onto the surface that I'm going to paint on, whether that's watercolour paper, canvas, or even on pastel paper. And by doing it that way, you know that the surface that you're painting on hasn't been damaged. What you're seeing I'm doing now is using the same colour of that burnt umber and ultramarine blue, mix up the grey mix, and just painting this side of the building now. Again, just going around the windows and just adding the little colours in. Darker shades, lighter shades. So I want some of that texture to come through the next layer of paint that I just quickly put over the top of this picture. Remembering that watercolour paint is translucent. So the colours that I'm putting on now, this grey colour, with all the different shades and the light tones and the dark tones, that's going to come through the layer of paint that I put on next. So when I come over this picture with a lighter colour of the stonework, these stains are going to come through, giving the feeling of a very old building. Again, it's just piece at a time. Take your time. When working on any sort of piece of work, just take your time. There's no rush. Now adding in the same colour, different strengths, just to give those patches of colour on the wall. Cutting around the windows, filling in the shapes. All I'm doing is following my pencil lines, going over the brickwork. Again, this is all wet into wet, so I get a nice soft edge. Going around the window frames and filling in this side first. Stand me back having a look. Again, just with water. Coming with a slightly darker mix here. Just filling in the base of the building. Taking a section at a time. On my little palette that I'm holding here, I've got all the colours already mixed up, so I don't have to go off and mix colours. They're there as I'm holding them, so I know where they are. I don't have to go and mix up colours while I'm wet the paper. The minute you wet the paper, it's going to start to dry, so it's best to have your colours already mixed. So that's what I do. I mix my colours before I wet the paper, so the colours are already there. Otherwise the paper start to dry before you put the colours on. Just finished off this bottom piece here, painting around the road sign that's just there. Stepping back and having a look. Wetting this piece now. This is the corner edge. A little bit of water coming on with the same strong colour. Putting in those shapes there. Now on this side, the other side has dried now. I'm now putting water on this edge. Picking up the colour. Loading my brush. And doing a piece at a time. Not to push too hard with your brush. Putting in the base. Straighten up that line. Now I'm going to do the other side. Step back and have a look. This is the underneath of the balcony. Wet it first. There's a little window just above the door there. Just do the edge of this side with just water. Picking up some paint. Believe it or not, that is water. It's a little bit dirty. I should have cleaned my water up. And here I am putting on the paint now. Going in around that round window. Going over it. It's got masking fluid on, so I'm not worried. Don't have to cut in around the edges. It's a good thing with masking fluid. You can just paint straight over it. And that way when you take it off, you're left with a perfect shape. Top of the door there. Just adding a little bit of detail, darkness underneath that balcony, just to create shadow over my window, down the edge of the door. Step back and just have a little look, make sure it's right. Come on this side now with some clean water. I emptied my water out there and changed it. Come on with some nice clean water now. Just doing the edge of the building. Making up a slightly darker colour, a little bit more brown in this blue mix. Following my pencil lines that are very faint underneath there. It's all the way the building overhangs of the edge. Darkening down the balcony a little bit. Following that line down, and that line, just to give it that darkness. Step back and having a look. I need to darken this just a little bit more. And all I'm putting on here is just clean water. If you put a layer of clean water over something, it acts as another layer of paint and it makes it darker. Here I'll put on a little bit of paint now. Wasn't dark enough. That's better. That's it. Darken this edge down here. Again with water first. Just straighten up that building edge. Picking up some paint now. I'm putting that in with paint. When I'm painting, whether it's oil or acrylic or watercolour, I always stand. I have a big easel that I've propped up here, and I have all my little bits and pieces around me on little tables so I can just reach down and get them. If I'm drawing, if I'm working on a working sketch, or if I'm drawing from a photograph or from life, or if I'm doing pastel work, I'll be sitting down. If it's a big piece, then I'll stand. So if I'm doing a life drawing, I'll certainly stand for that. If I'm doing a portrait of somebody, I'll be sitting and taking the sketches from that. Or if I'm doing a pastel, again I'll be sitting down. And then when I turn it onto a bigger piece, then I'll be standing. What I'm doing now is I've picked up a raw sienna and a little bit of burnt umber, and I'm now painting over the top of my grey wash. The grey wash is completely dry now, and as you can see, some of those grey colours are coming through this layer that I'm putting over the top to represent aging and the way that the bricks will stain and colour over the years of it being here. Just step back and have a look. Now I've mixed up some more colour. Make up enough that you're going to need. And again, it's this raw sienna with a little bit of burnt umber in it. And I'm just now following the little pencil lines I can just about see. I'm painting in the posts and the pillars of the building. Just cutting in around the window, leaving the window frame. They're going to come in with a burnt umber and a little bit of light red when we get around to doing them. Picking up some more paint. Just adding that side in. Cutting in around this curve, the window, bit of a windowsill there. Just down the edge here. Again, this is wet on dry. I haven't wet any of this. I'm just using wet paint on this dry piece of paper. Cutting in around the windows. Coming down the edge of the building here by the posts and pillars. There's a little shape here as it comes in. Just going to go over that. Picking up some more paint. The bottom half of this is nearly done with this raw sienna mix and burnt umber. Just stepping back and taking a look. Just straighten that edge up a little bit more. Step back, have a look, let's start at the top now. It's the same colour mix. Then I'm coming down on this square post here, picking up some more paint. Underneath here, this is a little bit of overhang of the building. We're not far from the Turner Gallery, which is in Margate, and that's where they did the Turner Prize from last year. It's a nice big gallery, and Turner, he used to live in Margate, and they built the Turner Gallery on the site where Turner lived with Mrs. Booth. And also we had in Ramsgate another artist used to live, Vincent van Gogh, and I'm sure he would have walked down to Margate and painted some of those beautiful sunsets that we get over here. And the light is amazing. When I stand in my studio on that round window and the sun sets, the buildings across the road from me, they just turn blood red. It's just amazing to see. And on that seafront, when the light catches the water, it's just an amazing view. And maybe soon I'll be able to get a photograph of it, or maybe some footage, video footage to send over, just to show people where I paint and work. Very fortunate to live and work around here. And just up the road from my gallery is Tracy Emin's new gallery that she's building and opening soon. So all around this little town there's some amazing art going on and some great artists. As I said earlier, I'd like to promote the local artists in my studio and in my gallery, I know a number of them. It's good to work with them. It's just a lovely place to be. Just cutting in now, just squaring up some of these lines that I put in. I use a corner of my brush at the top there to pick out some of those lovely carvings on the stones. And you see the way that the grey paint comes through, leaving patches on stonework. You do that work underneath so that the translucent colour comes through. It's just one of the best ways of painting watercolour. That's why I love it. It's the translucentness of it. As I said earlier, my favourite medium is oil painting. I just love oil painting. Maybe one day in one of my painting classes I'll do an oil session. You can follow along with me. Nearly finished this building. We're just finishing off this side now. Using the flat edge of that brush, letting the brush work for you. Picking up some more paint here. Keeping the brush at the angle that the building's going. Cutting off to that corner. Keeping that chisel edge shape of that brush along the edge of that line. Stepping back and looking. I like to step back quite a lot as I'm painting. And that way you can see what is working for you and also what is not working. That gives you time to correct it before it's too late. You know, sometimes in my early times of painting I would just keep working on one piece, then it's put it away, you come back to it, you look at it and you see, oh, this is wrong, that's wrong, I shouldn't have done it, and you spent many hours in putting this work together. And that's why now I always step back, look, give it a few minutes, come away from it, come back to it, and then correct it. Just coming down this edge here, picking up some paint, following that curve, the balcony, bring that colour around the window. Finish this side of the building with this raw sienna and burnt umber mix. Just straighten up this side with that same colour down the edge of the building. Painting those little overhangs. Stepping back and looking. Just squaring it up a little bit more at the top here. Just bringing in that little bit of colour, keeping the brush nice and shaped. Use the corner of my brush in these gaps here, just to put that stone colour on them. Now I'm coming in with my darker shadow colour here, which is ultramarine blue and burnt umber. Cutting in very carefully around the edge. Remember, I've already put a light grey on this path, so now I'm putting in the darker side, just around the pathway here, following up towards the back end of the building, which goes up a slight hill. Just drawing it down to the edge, going over where my mount goes and just curving it around. And again, I'm not wetting this, I'm just coming in with wet paint. I'm now putting in the shadow of the building, following that pencil line that I put on, and just darkening this down. Just taking that hair off, try not to scratch at it. As I said earlier, just use my fingertip there, just to push it off with your fingers or your brush. Do not use your nails, you will scratch the paper and you'll always have a little mark there. Now I'm just painting it backwards and forwards just to get this colour on. Quite dry. Picking up some more paint in a moment. Put that edge in. There we go. Just black that in. The darker this is, the lighter the light's going to show. So where the road is in front of the building, it's going to be a lighter colour, and where the shadow is, it shows you the darker side. I'm putting in a shadow here on the floor of the path of the road that runs down the side of the building, leaving a little gap, but just putting in some little shadow marks just there, following those marks. Putting the curb in. Left it to dry, and now coming in with just a darker colour, just adding in those little steps that are in there that step back into the building. And now I'm going to be painting in the shadow from this lamp. I'm going to get on the other side. Following the shape of the road. My little pencil marks I put on there. I've took off the masking fluid off the windows, and now I'm going to paint in the windows and the glass throughout the whole building. They were masking fluid on there, I've took it off. And what I'm doing here is I'm using the dark mix. I'm painting on the window frames first, which is the brown, and it's a burnt umber and a little bit of light red in there. And I'm putting in the window frames first, as you can see, leaving the white of the glass ready to be putting the glass in. There's a little tiny bit of a window you see on this side, just as the mount comes in and cuts it off. Just coming around on this side. This, as I said earlier, is the Lord Mayor's windows. This one and the other three. And my studio space just underneath him, I had the 4 windows on the left hand side of the building and 2 on the right, and that lovely round window right in the middle. The light I get from here is amazing up in my studio. It's a very big space and it's very bright and very light. At the beginning of the video where you see me talking about the project, I'm actually sitting there in my studio, and that is the light that's coming in there. That was filmed in just the natural lights. It floods with light, it's beautiful. It's a good space to be. And also the glass on my studio windows, it's mirrored. So if you're standing outside looking at the windows, all you see is a reflection of yourself back in them. They're a little tricky to paint. I didn't do that. I didn't put a reflection in at all. I just put in the sky reflecting in the glass as I would normally. But in real life, if you look at the photograph, you'll see a reflection or a mirror image of the building dead across the road from me. And I didn't bother putting all that in. I just put in the light coming from the sky reflecting in the window. A little easier. Putting in the sash windows here. They always used to have that window open all the time until a seagull popped down and went in for his dinner. So the secretary soon got him out and shut the window, and now they won't open the window at the top there. But the seagull still comes back and taps onto the window for his sandwich, which is quite amusing. So it's very close to the sea. And sometimes, you can have the windows open on my side. These little ones I'm drawing now, they open slightly. They have a little crank window handle on them that I can crank open. And they open just enough to let air in, but not enough to let a bird in. And sometimes you can stand in there and you can listen to the sea. If it's a very rough night or a very rough day, you can certainly hear the sea from there. I'm not far at all from the seafront. So these windows here that I'm painting now, the top half here that I'm doing, the round, the curved piece, the open bit, and about halfway down is my studio. The other half of the window is the gallery. I have a thing called a mezzanine floor put in. So as you come into the front door, straight above your head is the floor to my studio, and as you walk into the gallery, it opens up and it's like a balcony. I'm walking up on a balcony looking down into the studio. I have a staircase that leads up to there, and also I have a lift for people with disabilities that can get up, who have trouble walking, or maybe a wheelchair, can come up and paint with me. It's a perfect design building for exactly what we use it for. I've very nearly finished this window here. The little brushes that I'm using here is a little folding brush. It's a little travelling brush. It slides inside. It's a nice brush. I take this away if I'm out painting, if I go away anywhere. I have 3 of them that sit in my pocket, along with a small paint palette. When I'm out painting, that's what I use. And when this virus is over and finished with, I'll be taking you out with me, and we'll be painting outside in plain air, which is one of my favourite things to do. Just cutting in around that door. The doors are open here. This cuts in quite a narrow edge of this door. You can see the way the shadow works on that light, and on the lighter side of the road there is a very light grey, and with the dark grey against it, that hard edge, it gives it a lovely shadow effect. And the light was just above my building when I took this photograph, as you can look back at the picture and see. So the shadows were directly in front of me where I was standing. So there was no shadows going across the road. And the sun here comes up from the left hand side of the picture, and it goes across to the right hand side. Now just painting in the windows with the ultramarine and burnt umber. And remember, if it's glass, whatever's in the sky will reflect in the glass. So I'm just adding in some shadows, lights and dark sides, these glass windows. Take it off some masking fluid there as it's just left. Leave that for a minute, I'll come back to that. Do this next window. So I've wet it first with water. Picking up the paint, going back onto this side now. Well, I've already damped that with some water, and I'm putting in the grey colours, leaving some light and shadow. Coming back to this one, stepping back and looking, making sure it works, and it does. Just carry on. The other little window's just drying off. It's not too dry, it's a little bit damp still. Picking up some paint. Now doing this one. Putting in a little bit of water again, it just dried off too much. When I was standing and looking at my picture, I could see if it's wet by the shine on the paper. And it had just dried off just a little bit too much. I like to re-wet that one. Just adding in some of that bluey grey wash, representing light from the sky. Again, wet. Give it a couple of minutes to soak in, a couple of seconds, pick up some paint and add it in. I didn't go back that quick, I edited that piece, but I left it for a few minutes just to start to dry, so the shine went a little bit dull on it, ready to take the paint. If you put it on when it's too wet, it runs and it could run down the picture, so wet it, let it soak in for a few minutes and then put the paint on. Again, I'm just wetting it with just clean water, leaving it to soak for a second, then coming back, looking at my picture and putting in that window. And the same thing, taking off some more masking fluid, wetting it now. And just painting in the glass. As I said earlier, this glass is mirrored, so I'm just going to paint it in the same way as I do upstairs and give that feeling of light catching in the glass, not reflecting the image across the road. Just adding in this colour here. Taking off some more masking fluid that was left on, wetting it. Just picking up some more water, continue wetting this window. Leave it to dry for a few minutes and then come on and paint in the glass. Just that blue effect is what I want. So that is literally ultramarine blue with a tiny little bit of burnt umber into it to give it a grey tint. Just adding in that light reflection there.
Just putting in some more of the window, the darkest shades underneath where the window edge sits. The shadow side there, down there. Doing the underneath the window. Underneath the window there, where the sash window comes down. Just putting in some darker sides. Doing my little round window now. Just putting in the window frame. Putting in the reflection on the glass. My windows in my studio were open, so I'm now taking in the little dark gap where they were opened up a little bit. And here. Just to give the impression of the window being slightly open. These windows, as I said earlier, you can crank them open and they lean inwards, just the top half. Just filling in the little open space upstairs and darkening that gap. That's with the ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And I'm putting in the reflection on the glass here. So I'm wetting it first. Then putting in the blue wash over the window. And then doing the same to my round window, leaving the brown paint that I put on earlier to dry. So wetting them all first, and putting in that blue wash colour to represent shadow. And there's a nice shadow just at the top of this window where the balcony sits. Now the door, I'm gonna wet it first, pick up the dark grey colour when it's all wet. Just painting in the dark greys, leaving some little white gaps, white shapes inside the building. Left it to dry. Just dampened that edge a little bit. Leveling off and dampening the step. Ready to put that in. Making it a light grey and a dark grey.
down the edge of that door with a little bit more darker colour. Just little shapes and forms in there. Painting on the roadside here with the name of the road. This one is just finished now, just finished the sign. We'll put mant around it. And I'd like to thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed painting it. Look after yourselves through these troubled times. Keep safe. And I'll see you again soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye and God bless.